Good morning, everyone. My name is Russell Smart. I'm Deputy Head Teacher here at DBS JP. Been here, I think this is my fourth year, I lose track, fourth year here now, I think. And I'm responsible for the things that are academically related to your child's growth. So that's the curriculum, teaching and learning, and the purpose of today's call, I lead on assessment and assessment procedures here as well. I'm joined by Mrs. Yates.
Hi everybody, I'm Laura Yates and I'm Assistant Head of Year 5 and 6. I have been here at DBS JP for 7 years. I've also been English lead and this is my first year as Assistant Head. I'm going to be supporting, or I am supporting Mr. Smart with assessment as well this year.
It's present tense. She is supportive. She's doing a very good job as well. She's very interested in data and assessment, just like I am as well. And I think that will come through with the workshop today. So thank you for joining us. The workshop is in 2 parts this morning. The reason being the assessment we're going to talk about, which is NGRT, which is a reading assessment, and GLs, they've got slightly different audiences. So for NGRT, if you're a parent on the call of a year 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 child, the NGRT part is relevant for you. If you're a year 1 parent on the call, by all means stay, but your child isn't sitting the NGRT progress tests. At the end of that part, Laura's going to lead on that section. At the end of that part, we'll have a Q&A linked to NGRT specifically. And then if the year 2 and 3 parents wish to, you can stay on the line, of course, but if they wish to, they can leave the call when we then go on to talk about GL progress tests. That's only relevant for our year 4, 5 and 6 parents that are on the call today. By all means, stay for all of it, stay for some of it. It's great, and thank you for joining us this morning. So going to make a start by going through and sharing with you what our focus is. So hopefully by the end of the next half an hour, 40 minutes or so, you will leave the workshop with a really good understanding of what the NGRT and progress tests are, but also why we do them in school. We'll talk to you this morning about how we are working with your children so they approach the assessments in a calm and mannered approach. We don't want anyone feeling anxious about them. So we'll talk about what we do in school, but also I know lots of parents ask me what you can do at home. The easy answer is, I won't spoil it for the slides later on, you don't need to do much because we do lots in school, but I know many parents are keen to support at home. We'll go through that as well. And then we'll also touch upon how we use those resources as well, results. Get my teeth in straight. As I've mentioned, you're on mute this morning, but please do use the chat function. We're operating on 2 devices, so Laura can see all the questions coming through. If the question is relevant to stop and answer at that point, we certainly will try to do so, or we might try and group questions together and answer them as and when we know we're going to cover it on the slides as well. So hand it over to Laura to start with, who's going to talk to you about the NGRT assessments for years 2 up to 6.
Good morning, everybody. So we're going to start with talking about NGRT, which I have a lot of experience with as previous English lead. So NGRT stands for the New Group Reading Test, and it's an assessment tool we use to measure students' ability in reading. The test itself assesses students in their reading fluency, comprehension or understanding of the text, and their vocabulary skills as well. The assessment's taken right from year 2 right up to year 6, and the assessment's also taken 3 times a year. So we assess the students at the start of the year in September time, then just after the winter break, and then at the end of the year. So the students are going to be taking their NGRT this week, next week, and over the next few weeks. So NGRT is used widely in schools and educational settings to identify students who might require support in reading, and we can put interventions in place for those students to make sure they're getting the support they need. But it also enables us to identify those students who might need extra challenge as well in their reading lessons. So we're going to have a little look at some example questions from the NGRT so you can get a flavour of what they look like. So if we start with the question on the top left, you can see here, this is actually assessing the students on their vocabulary. So the students are having to choose which word correctly goes into the sentence. The question on the right-hand side of the screen that you can see ask the students to choose the correct word to go into the sentence, but the sentences are in paragraphs this time. So it's a little bit trickier for them. And then later on in the test, the students are tested on their comprehension. So they're asked to read a paragraph and they're asked lots of questions. It could be inference questions, retrieval questions, but it's basically to assess their understanding of what they have read. So how do we prepare the students for this assessment? So I'm going to talk you through how we prepare them in school on the left-hand side and how you can prepare the students at home on the right-hand side. So in school, the students have 2 reading lessons a week. And in those reading lessons, we really ensure that the students are able to practice those fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary skills that they will be assessed on in the NGRT test. The students are quite familiar with the assessment now, particularly if they're in year 3 upwards, because they've done the assessment before. But we also ensure that they are familiar with the types of questions that they'll be asked, and this is fed into their reading lessons. They're given lots of practice examples in their reading lessons, and they're also given lots of opportunities to read right across the curriculum. So practice of reading skills doesn't just happen in reading lessons. They could be reading in MSc lessons, in science lessons, so they're really given the chance to consolidate their reading skills across the curriculum. We also reading has a really high profile in the school, so we're always constantly celebrating reading, particularly accelerated reader. In our assemblies, we're always sharing which classes or which individual students have read the most words, taken the most quizzes, encouraging that reading culture in school as well as at home to ensure that they are they're reading as much as they can so they can do as best they can in that assessment. They also have their library sessions as well, bi-weekly, so they get a chance to go to the library, choose books that they would like to read for pleasure, which again will enable them to really boost their reading ready for that assessment. So how can you help at home? So encouraging your students to read, your children to read as regularly as they can at home. So they will come home with their library book, their reading for pleasure book, but they'll also come home with their accelerated reader book. So it's really important that you're encouraging them to read as much as possible at home, getting them into a nice routine, perhaps reading before bedtime. And if you can, even testing them on their comprehension, asking them questions about what they are reading. After they've read their AR book, they take a quiz, which again tests their comprehension and understanding. So encouraging them to take those quizzes will really give them that practice. A lot of the questions are similar to the style that are in the NGRT test as well. So again, encouraging them to take those quizzes at home. And sometimes some of the students, particularly in year 4 upwards, they're reading quite chunky, thick books that might take them quite a while to get through. Therefore, it might take a few weeks for them to actually quiz. So in the meantime, they can take article quizzes on Accelerated Reader. So these are short extracts that they can read and quiz on in the meantime, so that they can they can build up to practice those questions, because it might be a few weeks before they actually get the opportunity to take a quiz on their book. And also, finally, just exposing them to reading lots of different materials at home. It could be non-fiction texts, it could be magazines, articles, reading menus, just exposing them to as much reading material as possible at home and around the house and when you're out and about as well. So now it's a time for a little Q&A on NGRT. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, would you like to pop them in the chat? I know Mr. Smart said that you're all on mute at the moment, but if you've got any questions that you would like to ask related to NGRT, do you want to pop them in the chat now and we will try and answer those for you?
Okay, I'll give you a moment to put some in. There's a couple coming in already. I know some people have typed in early, some people might still be typing. So first question I can see is about a platform that we would recommend to get the children used to something similar with the types of quizzes. I think probably the go-to platform is definitely going to be Accelerated Reader. It's something that all children have access to. It's something they're familiar with that we have in school as well. So it's probably the easiest one if you're looking at online quizzing. Lots of the books that your children bring home, especially if they're scheme-related books, will have questions inside the front cover, particularly if they're an Oxford University Press book, Oxford Owl book, etc. So it's seeing those questions as well. I'm not normally one to recommend textbooks or the revision books, but there's plenty available at is it CGP books?
CGP, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's something you necessarily have to go out and purchase, but it's short comprehension. The NGRT is often, if not always, multiple choice questions as well. So often our reading lessons, we're really encouraging children to go deep and write longer sentences. That's not actually needed in the NGRT either. Can you think of any other platforms that you've used in the past?
I think the main ones would be Accelerated Reader, the quizzes that they take. The style of questions are very similar to what is in the NGRT. And the students do get a lot of practice of those NGRT style questions in class. But other than that, I think would be AR quizzes would be the main one that would be best.
Which links to the next question about article quizzes and how they're found. When you log into Accelerated Reader, rather than clicking the option to take a quiz and then searching for the book that you've just read, article quizzes, I believe, are on the home page. They're quite easily accessible. Can you recall?
Yes, and what we can do is we can get the class teachers just to remind the students how to access those article quizzes as well. We did show the students at the start of the year, but obviously we're now in May, so we can give them a little reminder and get the class teacher to show the class how to access the article quizzes again, which they're really useful. As I said, when some students are reading these really lengthy books, it can be a long time before they take the quiz. So it's a good quick win just to read these short quizzes and practice those styles of questions that they might get in their NGRT.
Yeah, the article quizzes are really powerful, especially as Laura mentioned, our older children are reading quite lengthy books, and sometimes it's a bit disheartening that they haven't done many quizzes, but it's because they're reading the longer books. Question about year 2 having sat the test already. All year groups, if they've been with us since September, have already done Form A and Form B, and we shared the results of each of those with you, and it is via your DC Prologue, and it's the same place you get your child's school reports. Year 2 is when it starts, so if your child's in year 2, they've done 2 assessments, Form A, Form B, and if your child is older and been with us a longer time, they would have done the 3 NGRT assessments each academic year that they've been here. It's a KHDA requirement that they do it, so all children in British schools in Dubai have to do it. Do we know what day of the week it is? They are, if your child's in year 2 and year 3, because of the age of your children and maturity of them, they're sitting them across quite a large window. So they'll be sitting them maybe 1-to-1 or the learning system with small groups, because that's more comfortable for them. So to give you an exact day your child is doing it is a bit tricky for year 2 and year 3 because the teachers are just working through their registers. We do have a timetable for years 4, 5 and 6. And I can ask the teachers just to reach out with that. The only thing I would add is that if for any reason we need to change those times and dates, it can be a bit unsettling if we've told you one date, but the teacher then for a different reason needs to change the date. Maybe some children are absent and it's better they sit it in one go. So there needs to be some flexibility with that timetable. But I'll look, see if we can share that with you, maybe in Friday's newsletter, especially for the GL test, which we're going to talk about later. It'd be useful for you to know the specific date of your children's GL. NGRT, not so much because it's quite a large window for that one. A good inclusion question. Do you want to take this one, Laura? The example is about dyslexia, but any children with any sort of inclusion need, obviously that's catered for.
Yeah, so the test is adaptive as well. So the students all sit the same assessment at the same starting point, and as the students work through the test, they first and foremost they don't have to do it within their class setting. So as Mr. Smart said, they can do it in smaller groups with the inclusion team if they like. So we ask the students what they prefer. Would they prefer to stay with the class? Would they prefer to be in a smaller group? The test is adaptive, so they start at the same point, and as they work through the test, if they get questions right, it takes them in one direction, and if they get questions wrong, it takes them in another direction. So the questions are very much catered to the ability or the needs of the student. And of course, when we're preparing the students for the assessment as well, the students get lots of input on strategies and how to answer the questions. They can have printout copies as well of, and we do this with the GL reading test. They can have printout copies of the text as well, so they've got that to read from rather than looking at the screen and looking back down and things like that. So the tests and the assessments, the NGRT is on devices, and the students in year 4 to 6, they carry out the assessment either in the wellbeing room as a class or in the classroom as well on their own devices, particularly in year 6, because they bring in their own devices. They do it on those in their classroom setting. Anything else to add about that?
No, it links well to Ali's question about the younger reading levels, because it's adaptive. When the child takes it for the very first time, it's based on their chronological age. But as majority of the children have already sat the NGRT, it actually bases it on their most recent result and then takes it forward. So as Laura mentioned, the NGRT kind of system itself already knows that your child sat it twice if they're in this academic year, they've been with us since September. But if your child's sitting for the very first time in their school career, it will base it on their chronological age and then work from there. And it can make the questions easier. It can make the questions more challenging.
It's not timed either, so the students can take as long as they need, and they can take breaks as well in between. We try and sit the assessments in the morning as the children are fresher, but they can take as much time as they need, and they can have breaks throughout if they need that.
That links really nicely to this question, Laura, about how long the test takes. Because it's adaptive, some children might finish the test in 5 or 10 minutes, because the last time they sat the test, it reached a certain point, let's call it point A, and then the test will then continue from point A. If that child is getting questions correct every single time, they might spend longer on their assessment. But if a child is getting some wrong, some right, and a bit of a mix, because it's adaptive, it's a very clever test that sits behind the scenes, it won't unnecessarily test them, if that makes sense. So once the system is confident of where your child's at, it will actually end the test at that point. So some children might complete it, as I said, in 10 minutes. Some might be half an hour. We've allocated one of your child's reading lessons for this to take place. So I would preempt that typically they will finish it within 40 minutes. For this particular test. I don't know many children have gone on longer, and as I've said, it can range for anything from 5 to maybe 20 minutes on average. Timings I've covered. The exact timings I can ask class teachers to try and get a message out, and we can look at sharing that in the newsletter. Dedicated reading lessons, there's 2 a week. Laura covered that one, but we will support children with reading across the curriculum as well. The next question is a really interesting one about how other schools prepare children with mock tests. My philosophy with this, and different people will think different things from their own schooling, and I think Laura and I are quite aligned on this as well. We won't teach to the test, but we will support your children to be test ready. And I think there's a big difference with that one. Laura covered how we will expose children to question types, similar scenarios, but it's done through like a fun way. When we talk about the GLs in a moment, nothing we do with GL prep is about mock test every single day of the week. It's the UK SATs at the moment, and I was a bit of a typecast year 6 teacher in the UK. I taught year 6 for 9 years, and SATs week in the UK is highly stressful for everyone involved, teachers and children, and the run up to SATs week is awful. I would not like to repeat it again, if I'm being entirely honest with you. We tested our year 6s until they were all tested out. There has to be an element of preparing children so they're familiar with it, but no, we don't sit loads of mock tests. And for the NGRT, you can't really sit mock tests because every child test will be different. In the class of 26, when they're sat at their laptops and the teacher's walking around, there could literally be 26 different versions of that same test coming through. Is there anything on mock testing that you wanted to add, Laura?
Not really, just that we prepare them appropriately through the reading lessons, practicing those reading skills and strategies that they might need. So, for example, the first part of the test, when they're having to put words into a sentence, we talk the students through like the strategies that they might need to answer that style of question. So we try each word into that sentence, which one sounds the best, which one fits. Can they read around the sentence and try and figure out what the meaning of it is and the context of it is, because that might support them with which word is the right word to go in that sentence. So we give them similar style questions, and we give them strategies that they could apply to the actual test. So yeah, that's what I would
Super.
say.
Last two questions about NGRT. I'm conscious of the time. We haven't started on GLs yet. Today there are listening components because they're given the examples. It's narrated to them. If your child's in any year group other than year 6, we provide the headphones because they'll be on school devices. If your child's using their own device because they're in year 6, they will need headphones. But if any child hasn't got headphones, we will provide them. And I think I covered the time taken. It can be different, and it has no outcome. If your child completes it in 10 minutes, it doesn't affect their score going up or down, so long as it is measured against their reading age. So no, the time taken doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go down or up a reading age. All right. Anything you can prepare, technology perspective, I'll send that out in a note. It doesn't matter if you're on a PC or a MacBook. iPads, we won't be using iPads in year 6 for this. Actually, no, sorry, correction. You can use iPads for this. When it's GL, you can't use iPads for. If you're using a device like a Chromebook or a MacBook, you need Google Chrome as your browser. All right. Okay, conscious of the time, we're going to move on to GL. And I'm going to go through the processes of GL with you now in a similar format. Now, if you're a year 2 or 3 parent and wish to leave the call, you are more than welcome to do so. No offense taken. If you want to stay on the call, you absolutely can. But this next part is only for year 4, 5, and 6 parents. Okay, so GL progress test. If you're in year 5 and 6 as a parent, your child would have sat these last year as well, but they're introduced in year 4, and they are a requirement from KHDA that we do these assessments, and they cover English, maths, and science. And Laura and I will break down for you in a moment the specifics of each of those assessments. They are benchmarked against UK standards. They're a UK test that we are required to do. In fact, all British schools in Dubai are required to sit them, and we sit them once a year, and it's always in the summer term. Some schools, I know the school I started teaching at many, many decades ago, we actually did the GL progress test. It was paper-based back in the day, and we did it twice a year, once at the start of the year, once at the end. But the requirement as part of national agenda for us is to do it in the summer term. They're benchmarked against UK standards. What that means basically is that it is covering the UK curriculum. So everything that your child has already covered this academic year will be tested. There won't be anything new or anything different or anything to try and catch them out. It's covering the UK curriculum. It also means if you're going back to the UK or have plans to change to a British school elsewhere in the world, okay, you can take this assessment with you, and it's a recognised assessment there. We use it to track attainment and progress. We also have to report it to KHDA, and that's how they form a judgment of our school as well. So we are currently rated outstanding as a school, and part of that outstanding judgment was because we got outstanding results in our GL progress tests in previous academic years. And as I mentioned already, it is a requirement for KHDA. So I'm going to start by talking about the GL progress test for English. It covers the English curriculum. Now, it covers both reading skills and SPAG skills. So that's spelling, punctuation, and grammar. The children will be presented, if I do them kind of in reverse order, the children will be presented with a paragraph, and they'll be asked to spell certain words in that paragraph, and they will type their responses into their devices to record that in. Obviously, there's no spell check on their devices. They can't cheat in any way. The spelling is just typed in, and then they move on. And they hear that word. The question previously about NGRT, they will hear the person narrate that word to them, and they have to write that word in. It's about 20 words for each year group. We don't know what those words are in advance, but they will be common spelling patterns that they've worked on across the academic year. The reading comprehension, in a very similar way to NGRT, actually, they'll be presented with a text. It might be a story, it might be some non-fiction, and then they'll be asked some comprehension questions about that. And that actually is the majority of the assessment. So although it's an English test, it's actually majority a reading assessment, which you then might question why we do the NGRT as well, but we do so because we're directed to do it. There is a very small element, about 10 questions, maybe even less than 10 questions, that will check your child's understanding of punctuation and grammar. And almost all of those questions are multiple choice questions as we go through as well. I've got a little note along the bottom about the multiple choice and short answer. So they might be asked to type in a short answer as they go through. They can go back to the text. It's not a memory test. So they can go back to the text as many times as they wish. And we also, where possible, try to get printed copies of that text as well for your children. Okay, example questions. I created these myself, but they are similar to what you might see in a practice test. I've tried to pick out ones for each year group. I'll let you have a scan over those. I won't test you. You don't need to write the answer in the chat, don't worry. We've got a vocabulary style question first in the year 4 example. So they're given a sentence and they're asked to identify what that word gleamed might be within that sentence. The year 5 example is one a bit more about kind of the authorial intent of the text. And the year 6 example, again, kind of a vocabulary / language example. There are the answers, just in case you're playing along at home. Did you get them right? No judgment if you got them wrong. You can see just by nature of the multiple choice questions that if a child's really struggling, we always say to them, just make a good guess. Make a good guess at it. I thought I'd put this one in just to scan. And again, this is from last year's assessment. The spelling example on the left, they're given that paragraph, and that as I mentioned, they do have that read to them. And then an example of the multiple choice questions where they're just ticking the answer there. What we've tried to include in the GL section, different ways. Someone asked earlier about mock tests and practice tests. We prefer not to do that, but we will cover different things through games or activities. So here's just an example of what your children might do in the classroom. So here, this is getting the children to play around with their understanding of vocabulary and language. So we've got some key words down the left. And in this game, we're asking children to create a definition, to use it in a sentence. Can they turn the word where they created a question, where the word is the answer? Can they draw the word? So lots of different ways of them interacting with that word. Okay, maths. Again, covers the curriculum. It's broken down into these different areas where you have some number, some place value, obviously the 4 operations, some shape work, etc. as they go through. Again, there'll be multiple choice questions. They might have to type in a short response. Maybe they might have to reason an answer. And if they're reasoning, it'll be a very short typed response for that reason. In very few cases, there ain't too much typing. The only thing different to the maths assessment compared to all the other GL assessments is that there is an element of it which is timed, and that's the mental maths. For the first 15, if they're in year 4, or the first 20 questions, if they're in year 5 and 6, there are timed mental maths questions. They will have the question read to them. It'll be read twice in their headphones, and they will need to type in a short response. There's not usually multiple choice questions for this one, but they will type in a short response. And that's something that some children can be a bit anxious about. And it's something that we will work really hard with the children about responding quickly and efficiently. Like if they're going to do some working out on it with some pen and paper and some jottings, it's ensuring that's as efficient as possible for them. As I mentioned, that's the only part of all of the GL tests which is timed. Both the science, the English and NGRT, the children can take as long as they need to complete, but the mental maths is the timed element for it. Again, here are some example questions. So the first one, maybe continuing number sequence. So they're given some examples and what numbers will come next. They will literally just type those in. The one below that one is a function machine. They're given a starting number. They're told what to do with that number, what's the output. And then the one below is the inverse. So they're given the output and they've got to work backwards. I saw this in my daughter's year 4 home learning recently, so I know they've been practicing this one lots. And again, there's a reasoning and problem solving example on there as well. It's worth noting, I have mentioned it briefly, in the maths assessments, in fact, in all the assessments, we will provide children with pen and paper, pencils, whiteboards, if they require some jottings, even if for some children if we go back to the English, for some children to write out the word and see it written down will help them to spell it. And they are encouraged to do so. For the mental maths, because of the timing, although they won't be discouraged from using the pen and paper, they should try to do as much as they can in their heads. But if they need the pen and paper, it's available for them. And again, just a really simple game that we might play in school, and you can play this at home. You just need a dice to roll. It's a 6x6 grid. And you can see there's a load of fluency questions in there of the 4 operations. There's some percentage questions. You roll the dice twice. I'm sure I don't need to go through how to play it. You roll the dice twice. If I roll a 4 and a 2, I track across to the 4, down to the 2. So 10% of 450. Not going to put Laura on the spot to answer it, but I know she knows the answer, and I'm sure you do at home as well. This is just one way we would turn revision into a game in school, and a very easy one that you can replicate at home as well. Laura, you're going to take on the science.
Yeah, so the third and final GL progress test is science. So with regards to what's covered in that assessment, it covers the life and living processes, materials and their properties, and physical processes such as forces, electricity, earth and space. And all of these topics are covered with the students, and they're assessed on those areas in the test. The test is the format of the test. There are application-based questions where the students have to apply their knowledge of those areas above to the questions, and they're given different scenarios in the science test, and they're also assessed on the scientific inquiry skills as well. So that could be observing or measuring, or they could be given an investigation where they have to choose the right equipment that would be required, or they might be given some data, for example, from an inquiry that's been conducted, and they have to interpret that data and analyse what that would mean. So we're going to have a little look at some example questions from the science test. So you can see here on the left, I'm not going to read them to you, but you can have a little look there at the true or false question that they might be given. And the question on the right, you can see here, again, they're given a question, a biology-based question with multiple choice answers. Or as I said, they might be given questions linked to scientific reasoning, where they've got to explain and apply their scientific knowledge, or inquiry-based skills as well. So when we're preparing the students in the classroom, like Mr. Smart said, we will do this through games. So for example, this example is walkabout bingo. So the students might be given lots of questions linked to their scientific knowledge. And then what they have to do, they're allowed to answer one question themselves, and they can write their name that they've answered that question. And then they can walk around the room and ask their peers the answers to the other questions and collect their responses and write their names as well on there. So we always try and make revision fun and exciting and varied for the students.
Also, I know that is a history question because I put the history questions on there. So it's not science on those ones. We wouldn't be asking children about the 17th century.
Okay, so how do we prepare the students? So in school, we make sure that we map out our curriculum to cover all of those areas that we've just discussed for maths, English and science, to make sure that we've got full coverage and that they're prepared for those assessments. As like the NGRT, we expose the students to those test style questions, so they're used to them within our lessons. We teach test strategies, so we talk to the students about timing, if they get stuck on a question, what they should do, that they should move on and come back to it at the end. Other than the reading test, the adults in the room can read the questions to the students if they're stuck and they need that support. Sometimes just hearing somebody else or an adult read the question can help the student. So we teach them a variety of test style strategies so they feel prepared going into that assessment. And then we also put interventions into place as well. So for certain students who might need an extra boost, or we know there's gaps in their learning, we put interventions in place to give them that extra support ready for the assessment. With regards to how the assessments are logistics and how they're carried out and where they're conducted, in year 4, the students carry out their assessment in the wellbeing room for all the GLs on a device, on a laptop. Year 5, they will do the assessment in their classrooms, but using a laptop trolley. And in year 6, they will do it in their classrooms, but they will use their own devices to do the assessment.
So ways you can help at home. One way to help at home is not to stress children out. And I know I say it very lightly as a parent of a year 4 child going through this as well later in the next few weeks. This isn't about cramming. It's not about revision. It's not about prepping, tutors, etc. If you continue to do the things that we've been doing across the whole academic year, children will feel settled, calm and ready and the best prepared they can. Things like daily reading, discussion about the books, as Laura mentioned for NGRT. All of year 4, 5 and 6 have access to IXL, which I know the home learning is set on IXL each fortnight. Children can log on to IXL at any time in the day, the week. So even if their home learning isn't IXL for that particular week, but there's something that they're worried about or something that you feel there's a gap, you are more than welcome to go on to IXL, even if the teacher hasn't directed children to that way. I would add a little caveat note to that one, though, is please do limit the time on that one. Children shouldn't be on it for hours, again, cramming and revision. Accelerated reader, we've already covered with the NGRT discussion, because that is a really good way to get children responding to different texts with the questions, and just completing those home practice each week. Home learning, as you know, as a school, is optional. Children aren't punished for not doing it, but they're rewarded and celebrated if they do it. I'm sure teachers over the next coming weeks will be dropping in kind of GL style questions into that home learning as well. So just being aware of what the home learning is for that week can also really help. For those parents that do wish to be actively involved, having that regular study schedule might work for you as a family. I know we're all very busy parents. There's 2 of us on the call today, juggling home and school as it is. So it's whatever works for your family with regards to the bits that you want to do. And above all else, and I know you would do this anyway, it's celebrating the efforts. It's not about getting the answers 100% correct. It's the effort and the progress that your children are making. And you will know what their individual starting points are and what their goals are as well. Some of the games we've shared can be easily used at home. So have that discussion with children as well. And you can kind of create your own games as such too. So using the results, we have to share the results with KHGA. That's a requirement for us to do with them, but also you look at them internally as well. So we will track attainment and progress over time. And as children go through their journey at DBSJP, for those that have been with us for years 4, 5 and 6, we can look at the NGRT and the GL progress test over a longer period of time. We can see those children that are making the expected progress. Maybe some are making above the expected, and maybe there's a small group that aren't making the progress that we would hope for. So as a school, we can look to identify the strengths and the gaps that we have. We can put that into curriculum planning for next academic year. Okay, so this group of children found the biology questions really hard in science. Let's look at next year how we can really develop or push biology. Or this group of children or this cohort found fractions really tricky in the maths assessment. Let's really develop and enhance the way we teach fractions next academic year. So it does inform our teaching and interventions. We will share the results with you in the end of year reports, and that's the same for NGRT and the GL progress tests. But there's a very big asterisk that Laura typed onto this slide. There are snapshots, there are summative tests, and every child and every adult on this call presents differently when it comes to a test. I know that when I came to my GCSEs and A-levels, I completely bombed it. And what I did, fortunately, I'm still here and I'm teaching, but what I did in those assessments was not what I could do day to day. I was nervous. I hadn't prepared for it. I didn't feel great going into them. Your child's end of year report will reflect what your class teacher has seen across the whole academic year, what they see day in, day out, what they know about your child. So yes, we will share the results with you, but please treat them and read them alongside your child's report, which is a better, I believe, picture of what your child has done across the whole academic year, not how they performed in that 45 minutes on that one particular day. So we're going to take some questions for GL progress tests as well. There's been quite a few questions already about sharing dates with you. The weeks that the GL progress tests are happening are in front of you on the screen, and it'll be happening at some point that week for each of the children. So everyone, years 4, 5, and 6, will do the English during that particular week beginning the 1st of June. I'll see if we can communicate with you the specific day that your child's class will be doing it. But as I mentioned before, there's an element of flexibility to that, because if we have a number of children absent, we wouldn't want them to miss out, or we wouldn't want to disrupt it. So it might be that we move the assessment on that particular day. But thank you very much for joining the call. A large number of you stayed on the call for the GL part as well, which is great. I hope it worked being online. It feels like it did, and managed to capture lots of you if you're at home or at work as we go through as well. So I'll have a look to see the questions that are coming through, and we'll respond to them. If you haven't got any questions, please feel free. You can log off, or if you want to stick around to hear the answers, that's absolutely fine as well. First question I can see is about, again, academic ability and inclusion for this one with, in the example given, dyslexia. All children sit the same assessments for this, and it's not adaptive like the NGRT is. It measures against curriculum standard. What you'll get as parents at the end of it is you get a Stay9 score, Stay9 1, 2, 3, up to 9. And that's what you will get. If children do have a learning need, it might not just be dyslexia, it might be dyscalculia for the maths one as well, that we can provide certain support for them. We can't in the reading assessment, although we will get a printed copy of the text for them, which often helps. But in like the maths assessment science, we can certainly read the questions to them. And someone asked about year 3. This is not applicable if that person's still on the call. It's not for year 3, the GL progress tests. Can we share examples of the timed maths questions? They're often fluency based. They will have between 5 and 15 seconds to answer. What I will ask teachers to do, in fact, Laura, maybe on your team, we could put some examples maybe into the home learning over the next few weeks. And those examples. There are examples of timed maths questions online if you search for the year 6 SATs. And if you're a year 6 parent, that will help, but it won't help if you're not in year 6. But there's not much in the way of resourcing for timed mental maths questions, unfortunately.
We are preparing the students in the school for that as well. So they've been booking out the laptop trolleys and practicing Kahoots and quizzes that are timed. So they're used to that timed element, but also they're getting used to using the laptop and knowing where the keys are so they can quickly type their answers in. So we are spending a lot of time at the moment preparing the students for that mental maths test.
There's a question about generic assessments other than GL, progress test, and NGRT. We have got some assessments, but they're internal assessments taking place. It came up in the parent rep meeting yesterday, actually, about how we're looking to see those children that might have come back from distance learning with gaps, or how we know where the children are at. So best practice with assessment anyway is that it's ongoing, it's daily, and more often than not, children don't even know they're being assessed. But if a teacher asks a question at the start of a maths lesson, for example, that's an assessment. We call it formative assessment with regards to being in school. So often children don't even know they're being tested, but the teachers are posing it through questions or through quizzes in that way. Those results are not shared. We use them internally. But what will go on to the end of year reports is a narrative of how your children performed, about whether they were in line or maybe above expected attainment in that particular way. All right. Super. I can't see any other questions coming through, Laura. I don't think we've missed any.
No.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us online this morning. A real nice turnout of people. I hope that answered any questions that you had. Oh, a question, very quick question about year 5. They're not mocks necessary. They're just they're unit assessments, internal assessments. So if we've taught a unit of work on fractions, we might do a short quiz at the end of that unit about the fractions just to see. But no, they're not mock tests in that particular way. All right. Thank you for joining us all this morning. We're going to head off. The recording will be shared in the newsletter. So if any parents on your class groups ask, it will be in the newsletter on Friday. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.